Hi, this is Barbara Espinosa with American Freedom by Barbara and KFNX 1100 News Talk Radio. I'm in Washington, D.C. at the CPAC conference with Matthew Vadum, who is the expert on Acorn and the author of a new book called Subversion Inc. And I'd like to ask Matthew some questions about his book, how he came to write it, and Matthew is Google expanded as far as knowledge goes about Washington, D.C. Good morning, Matthew. Thanks for getting up on a Sunday morning and joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Barbara.
Tell us about your new book.
My new book is, the full title, including the subtitle, is Subversion Inc. How Obama's Acorn red shirts are still terrorizing and ripping off taxpayers. It is part history of Acorn, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, a nasty left-wing advocacy group that was created in 1970 and that President Obama has a long-standing relationship with. He represented Acorn as a lawyer. He organized for the Acorn affiliate Project Vote in 1992 and was instrumental in getting elected then Senator Carol Moseley Braun, Democrat from Illinois. And ever since he started running for president, especially in 2008, he's done his best to cover up his ties to Acorn. But writers and researchers such as Stanley Kurtz, who wrote a very good book called Radical in Chief, The Untold Story of American Socialism, and writers at biggovernment.com, and I have tracked down all sorts of information tying Barack Obama to Acorn pretty conclusively. So there's no way you can cover up everything.
In one of the interviews I had with you, we talked about Acorn being defunded, and you said that it had been defunded, but what few people knew was that the funds could be reallocated at a certain date. Have those funds been reallocated by the government to Acorn?
Not that I know of. What happened is because the federal appropriations process in Congress is pretty complex. So what happened is, after the undercover videos featuring Hannah Giles and James O'Keefe as pretending to be a prostitute and a pimp came out and thoroughly discredited Acorn, a few days later in Congress, a bill was passed by one of the houses, the Defund Acorn Act, and it was passed overwhelmingly in the House, and that bill or a similar measure, I can't remember which, was approved by the Senate. But the problem was that the legislation was worded too broadly, and it would have defunded any corporation or nonprofit that had ever been involved in any kind of shady dealings. So that would have wiped out the entire defense contracting industry. So they and I'm not saying they should, perhaps they should be cracked down on, but that's not my issue. I don't know very much about military procurement, defense procurement rules or anything like that. So I prefer not to talk about things that I don't know anything about. Anyway, what happened is later on, the ban on federal funds going to Acorn was attached as wording, as language in an appropriations bill. And appropriations bills only go from the beginning of the federal fiscal year, October 1st, to the end of the fiscal year, the next September 30th. So eventually a temporary ban was enacted on giving federal government monies to Acorn and its various affiliates. And then that was challenged in court, and a wacky judge in Brooklyn named Judge Gershon in Brooklyn, a federal judge said that the act was unconstitutional, that it was a bill of attainder, which is forbidden by the Constitution. It's when you single out an individual or an individual in a specific group for punishment without a trial. And that went back and forth in the federal courts for a while, but then eventually a judge who outranked Judge Gershon in Brooklyn reversed her decision, so the ban was upheld. But the ban only lasted for a year anyway. Fortunately, along the way, Acorn soon after started to disintegrate, and it filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy on election day, November 2008.
Now, yesterday,
So I guess the point is kind of moot.
yesterday in a seminar, you were on a panel, and Nita Moncrief, you and Mr. Ford,
John Fund of the Wall Street Journal.
John Fund, indicated that Acorn is not dead, it is alive and well, and it's like a snake that you can't cut its head off and get rid of. It just regenerates itself under a new entity.
It's a multi-headed hydra, or the example I like to use is that of the T-1000 Terminator machine from Terminator 2 movie, where you keep blowing it up and then the various pieces reassemble themselves, and then it comes after you and, you know, keeps trying to track you down and beat you up. So what has happened is Acorn is in bankruptcy, and they're winding up their affairs, and it will, I think technically it still exists right now, but it won't for much longer. But new Acorn-like groups are sprouting up all over the country, and what had happened is a lot of the state branches of Acorn, such as in California and Washington State and Texas and Pennsylvania and New York, Massachusetts and other places, and Maryland and Washington, D.C., have simply incorporated themselves separately as brand new nonprofit organizations with different names, and they're carrying on the same sort of work that Acorn did. The other two very large affiliates or branches of Acorn still exist. Project Vote, which is Acorn's notorious vote fraud manufacturing subsidiary, if you want to call it that, still exists right here in Washington, D.C. They still have the same office in southeast Washington, D.C., down by the old Marine Barracks complex. So Project Vote is still operating, and Francis Fox Piven, the notorious radical activist, academic, writer, is on their board of directors. The other, I guess what would probably be the biggest branch of Acorn, Acorn Housing, continues to operate. They didn't reincorporate or anything like that. They just changed their name to try and shake the stigma of being part of Acorn. So they changed affordable housing. Acorn Housing, changed its name to Affordable Housing Centers of America, and they continue to operate, engaging in housing activism and recruiting people.
What would you suggest to a citizen that is not as knowledgeable as you are about Acorn and all of its dirty dealings, that get the emails and literature in the mail asking for contributions, and it's got a good sounding name, but it may be a subversive organization to America? How would you suggest that they find these things out before they make contributions?
Well, they can check it out to see if it's associated with Acorn in my book Subversion Inc. that is being published May 10th of this year by WND Books, WorldNet Daily Books. They can also go to the website of where I work, Capital Research Center, which is capitalresearch.org. They can also look it up at an excellent site run by the David Horowitz Freedom Center called discoverthenetworks.org, which is an online encyclopedia of the left, and it's also an excellent resource. So you can you can do some research there are a few places.
I would like to let the audience know now that they can go to American Freedom by Barbara, and they can buy Matthew's book, Subversion, online from my website. Matthew, give me a little bit of insight about what you have thought about the CPAC conference.
Well, CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, the 2011 incarnation of it, was pretty good. I didn't get to go to a lot of the panels because I had to man a booth in the exhibit hall, but you know, there was a lot of energy here, and it was pretty exciting. And a lot of people were fooled by the Sarah Palin lookalike, which I thought was pretty funny, because up close it clearly wasn't her. 20, 30 feet away, maybe looked like her, but it was not her.
What did you think about CPAC allowing the Muslims to have booths in the exhibit hall, and about Go Pride?
Well, the Muslims for America was previously called Muslims for Bush before President Bush was elected, or early in his term. So they had been here at CPAC many times. So that was nothing new. You know, I don't really have an opinion on. I don't think allowing a group to have a booth is condoning. You know, is condoning what they believe in. They allowed the John Birch Society, which is, you know, has a tradition of being pretty extremist on some issues. Not everything, but pretty wacky on some issues. They let them have a booth. Traditionally, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which is mostly left wing on the positions that it's taken, they've had a booth at CPAC. Go Proud, I don't know. It's not. I don't really have a problem with it because it doesn't constitute endorsement of their views, and we're just here to talk about things. However, I respect the principled objections that a lot of conservatives had to them participating. But as I see it, we're just here to talk and hang out and compare notes on being activists and learn the latest about what's going on. It's not really a boot camp, and just because somebody's got a booth doesn't mean that everybody approves of what they stand for. So I find it hard to get really upset or excited about the question of who's got a booth and who doesn't.
Well, I thought for the people to be so adamant about Go Proud, because Go Proud was here last year. And
were they?
Yes, but
Okay.
there wasn't such a to-do made about it.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought maybe Log Cabin Republicans were here, which was another homosexual Republican group, but one that was more left-leaning in terms of their what they stood for.
What other subjects that I know Acorn is one of the things that really blows up your pants leg. What other
Really sets my hair on fire, doesn't it?
It sets your hair on fire too.
I've heard that phrase somewhere.
I know. I can't imagine where. It couldn't be from that Texas woman, could it? What other organization do you think presents a view of America that is not like Middle America, or doesn't represent Middle America?
Well, one that has managed to pass itself off as a mainstream organization when it's not is National Council of La Raza, which is a left-wing Latino special interest group. That they're not as bad as Acorn. I don't think they have the history of law-breaking and corruption that Acorn has, but on many issues they're just as left-wing, just as militant. And they're not a mainstream organization. They're pretty consistently, when they have to take a position, it's usually on the left. And as well, their name is It makes them very, it's suspicious. Their name means, La Raza means the race. And only a minority, a left-wing minority group could get away with that. Any other organization, hailing the race in its name is going to be condemned by the media. And I'm not saying anybody should start groups,
to do that.
The race, or whatever, Das Volk, if it was a bunch of German Americans saying the National Council of however you'd say it in German, Das Volk or Die Volk, people would be upset. So why wouldn't they be upset about Latinos doing the same thing? I don't really see what the difference is.
La Raza also supports illegal having the same rights as an American citizen.
They do, which defeats the whole purpose of having borders, of being a country. Because if a country can't control its borders, it's not really a country, is it?
You also know how I feel about John McCain, and they endorsed John McCain, and he spoke at their meeting. So that ought to give you a clue that John McCain will end up voting for amnesty.
Yeah, well, of course he will. He's supported it for a long time, and he's conservative on some issues, but on the big issues that count, he's usually not there for the conservative movement. He just sucks up to them at election time, when he always invariably moves to the right to try and make him look like a hardcore conservative instead of the squishy, moderate that he is.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Matthew.
Thank you.
Tell us some of the other projects that you're working on, if you can, because I know that the organization that you work for not only is a think tank, but it does a lot of political research.
Yeah, we do a lot of research into but it's all mostly centered around groups and excuse me, around funders of left-wing organizations. So we're always doing, ongoing research about George Soros, who's the preeminent funder of left-wing activism in America, and his group that he's deeply involved in with the creation of and with its operations to this date, the Democracy Alliance, which is a club of basically a club of liberal and radical gazillionaires, billionaires and multimillionaires who all want to turn America into a European-style socialist state. And other people involved in are Rob McKay, the Taco Bell heir, and Herb and Marion Sandler, the subprime mortgage hucksters, who nearly sank Wachovia Bank before it was bought up at fire sale prices, I believe, by Wells Fargo. Excuse me. And Peter B. Lewis, who is the founder of Progressive Insurance, and when they call it progressive, they mean it. It really is progressive because a good percentage of his profits he donates to left-wing causes, to Democrats and liberal pressure groups and what have you. And there are lots of these people involved with the Democracy Alliance, and they don't fund many things that most people would consider to be good. They send a lot of money to the Center for American Progress, which here in Washington, D.C. is headed by Bill Clinton's former White House Chief of Staff, John Podesta. And it's basically, it bills itself as a think tank on the left of center think tank, but really it's more of a public relations firm for the Democratic Party. They just churn out a lot of propaganda and research that is helpful to the Democrats. And they employ Van Jones, self-described rowdy black nationalist and communist, who worked for President Obama till he was forced out. He was Green Job Czar, and he was forced out around September of 2009 when it was discovered that he was a 9/11 truther who had signed the original 9/11 truther petition accusing the Bush administration of blowing up the World Trade Center and all that other crazy stuff.
Matthew, I appreciate very much this interview, and as soon as I get home it will be posted and you will be more famous than you already are.
Oh, well, thank you, Barbara.
Thanks a lot.